Now, everybody, I would like to welcome you to what's actually, Shaun, I don't know if you know this, but we've had a series of talks with industry professionals over the course of this lockdown period. And tonight, everybody, is really the finale of these series of talks because we're coming out of lockdown and we figure this has been the most golden opportunity of, the generosity of people in our industry coming to talk with us. So I'd like to welcome you all. And before I forget, because I may forget, I want to thank Brenna, Quintus and Elise, three people who have been so wonderful in putting all of these talks together, from the back end and the administrative and promoting all of these talks. So thank you to the three of you. And I'd like to introduce you all to Shaun Grant. Now, here's the go, Shaun. I'm going to read your entire CV because I got to tell you, I found it so unbelievably impressive because so often writers, they're the people that are in the background of all of this. They're the creators of something. And if a film's really good, in a funny kind of way, we don't even think of the writer because something's happening up there and we're transported. But I really want to read this because it's a very inspiring both CV and beginning of this CV. So everybody, I'd like to introduce you to Shaun Grant. He is a highly acclaimed screenwriter whose films have premiered at the world's most prestigious film festivals, including Cannes, Toronto, and the Sundance Film Festival. Recently, Shaun's sixth feature film, Nitram, had its world premiere in competition at the Cannes Film Festival, the first Australian film to do so in a decade, where it won the prize for Best Actor. In 2020, Shaun won his fifth Augie, which for those of you who don't know is an Australian Writers Guild Award, for Best Adapted Screenplay for Penguin Bloom. Prior to this, True History of the Cali Gang premiered at the 2019 Toronto International Film Festival. The much appreciated film saw Shaun reuniting with Justin Kurzel after their debut feature film Snowtown, which was selected for Cannes Critic Week in 2011, and went on to win the ACTOR Award, which is the Australian Academy Award, for Best Adapted Screenplay. Shaun's work on Jasper Jones and Berlin Syndrome gave him two further ACTOR nominations and an Augie win for Best Adapted Screenplay. In television, Shaun has written for multiple series, securing another Augie win and ACTOR nomination for his work on the miniseries Deadline Gallipoli. More recently, Shaun wrote the finale of Netflix's Mindhunter, for which he and the show's writing team received a Writers Guild of America nomination for Best Drama. Shaun currently has several film and TV projects in development in Australia and the US. Oh, there you go. I have to take a breath now. Shaun, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm incredibly grateful for you taking the time to spend, your very precious time with us. And I want to thank actually Julian Haig, who is an actor and a graduate of 16th Street, who after watching the talk we had with Tony Ayres, just said to me he'd like to reach out to Shaun Grant. Of course, I was delighted, and he did, and you agreed to talk with us. So thank you, Julian. I know you're in the background watching, so thanks to the two of you. Shaun, there are three things I'd like to talk to you about, and then open it out to some questions with the people that are watching, and we'll bring them back onto the screen with us. The first is the connection between who you are as a human being and the writer that you've become, inclusive of the stories that you've been drawn to tell, and the way you've actually wished to tell those stories and have told them. The second is, for all the writers that are listening, a little bit about your creative process, from the idea to the execution and the writing of something. And thirdly, for the actors, the connection between what you write on the page and through their performance, what appears on the screen. So they're the three things I'd like to kind of talk about. Is that okay with you, those three areas?
Sounds great. Yeah, I'm impressed. I know you've done your research, so I'm ready to go.
Fantastic. Look, obviously in preparation for this, I'd known your work, but I went a little kind of more, binge watching on the films that you've written. And something that struck me was how much I was drawn into the worlds that you have created and the very, very specific perspectives in which these stories have been told. And what I kind of felt was this, your ability to explore the causal relationships between moments and the psychologies of human beings, and sometimes deeply disturbed psychologies. My question is, if they were to write a film about your life, what would be some of the pivotal moments in your life that have shaped you as a person and consequently the writer that you've become?
Wow, that's a tough one straight out the gate, Kim.
And I have been told that you're someone who just bypasses small talk and
Yeah,
always
yeah.
cuts to the chase. That's kind of a little bit of the word around town about you.
Yes, yes. No, that is fairly accurate. I mean, that relates to my work, I guess. I'd speak to. I came from a very working class background. Um, oh, I'm getting a phone call. Oh, hang on.
All right.
Fuck, it's Justin Kurzel. There we go.
Tell him to join in.
Yeah. No, I just sent him a new film idea of mine, so I bet you he's ringing about that.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so I came from a sort of a working class background, which can be quite strange. I find having, I started life as a school teacher and then came into the film industry knowing no one, sort of a little bit later in life, sort of late 20s. Yeah, so I guess my working background, I felt like a bit of an outsider to the industry. I think a lot of my work speaks to that. The significant aspects, I was raised by a single mum. My dad left when I was young. I think, particularly in the films that myself and the gentleman that was just trying to call me have made together, parenting is a huge part of them. An absence of a parent is a huge part of Snowtown, Kelly Gang and Knit Ram. My father was a larger than life character. There's a line in Snowtown where they're talking about John Bunting, Australia's worst serial killer, and they say, oh, he's got big ideas, that John. And that was a line directed regarding my father. He had grand ideas. He would, he left. He was working in Bosnia after the war, and he lived a very colourful life. Publican was just part of it. He's Don King, the boxing promoter, sued him at one stage, and it's just so he was an interesting character. And then just as we kind of were separate, and then we were coming back together in my early 20s, and then he took his own life, and so mental health, and sadly not the only one through my family to do so. So mental health is certainly an issue that you can see prevalent, be it, even the most recent film, Knit Ram, is clearly about someone with mental health issues. Penguin Bloom, Sam Bloom's dealing with depression throughout that film. So I definitely think, there's, your question is very much relevant. My life is in my work. Whenever even when I take a book like a Jasper Jones or a Berlin Syndrome, actually a perfect example of the book coming to me at a time when I was ending a relationship, and that book is a great example, and that film of when I speak to writers and they talk about write what you know. Everyone talks about write what you know. And I was like, I grew up, there was when I was coming through, there was and before I came through, Australia was all writer directors, and it was a lot of that, and it still to a degree is. And you would see all these films, and their first films of writer directors, they were all like, essentially their life. It was them growing up in a small town, a coming of age story. It was so, and they were dull. They were absolutely dull as dishwater. And really good directors who I'm like, oh man, if you just had a writer that, and gave you a script with a bit more in it, because they always look beautiful. There's not much there. And I think a large part of that is because there's this obsession with writing what you know. And the reason that I think of that is Berlin Syndrome. So I'm broken up with a partner, feeling pretty miserable. And then this book comes across my desk, and essentially it's about, a relationship that's coming to an end, or, almost before it started. And he, a guy locks a girl in his apartment and can't let her out. So I'm a big believer in write what you know thematically. So if you've gone through a breakup, rather than just go, I'm going to write it about a guy who lives in Melbourne and he's heartbroken and he's a writer, and it's like, oh God, I can't even watch. If I don't even watch things about writers, my eyes just roll. Like, artists always think they're more important than they actually are. So, anything about directors, or I don't want to know it. But if you can write thematically, like if you've gone through a broken heart, set it on the moon, set it, add something to it. Snowtown happened, following my father's death, and essentially is a film about a boy trying to find a dad. But it's not a boy living in country Victoria trying to find a dad. It's a boy trying to find a dad while Australia's worst serial killers are taking place. That it just makes it bigger. Like, for people to spend $17.50 or whatever the hell it costs now to go to the cinema, I can't remember, it's been so long, locked down. Like, you got to bang for their buck. You've got to give them more sometimes than just a small tale about love or something, So, yeah, I think you're right. There's certain moments in my life that have shaped me greatly, and they will always come into the work. They always do. Like, for instance, a little known fact is that Bruno Papandreou, who's a huge, Australia's biggest producer, essentially, done Gone Girl and lots of things, Nine Perfect Strangers, Big Little Lies, approached me to do The Dry, the Eric Bana, to adapt the book, because I was the crime guy. I'd done crime and it's a crime story, and I read the book, and for whatever reason, it didn't respond to me, but I thoroughly enjoyed my experience. That was based on a lunch. I enjoyed the time I had spent that afternoon with Bruna, and said, and she came from actually the area where Snowtown, the murders took place. And we again, working class girl, done good. And I was like, we've got to find something. And she was like, well, I got this book about a magpie, but I don't know that it's for you. So I read this book on a tram through Richmond one day, and tears are welling up. And as I said, because she didn't know that I had mental health, issues throughout my family. And it was really this story of a woman trying to overcome depression that I responded to. And I was like, no, actually, this is more me than some guy trying to solve a murder in a small country town. She knew I came from a country town, so I guess it was that link. But yeah, I always try to find something. I think you just have to. I think actors have to as well. You've got to find what you relate to that story, and really gravitate to it and hold on to it. Otherwise, it's just fake, And I've done fake on a couple of occasions in television land. I would have done a job in my early years, not necessarily because I needed to, because I've always been pretty fortunate that Snowtown just, straight off the bat did so well, and jobs have been there. But I did certain things because I was like, oh, I've never tried a legal drama. I've never tried a teenage sort of thing. And I didn't connect to the material. I was just doing it as a academic exercise, I suppose you'd say. I don't write that way. Like, if my gut, my heart's not in it, I don't do my best work. And and I think actors that I know, and a large majority of my friends are actors, are kind of the same in that regard.
The question that, just obviously to me is just a good kind of segue, is you said, Snowtown did really well off the bat. Now, it's a pretty incredible thing. 2007, I've read that you were at a crossroads in your life. Your dad had died a couple of years before then.
Mm-hmm.
And you read a book, and was it Killing for Pleasure?
No, it was the other. It was
the other one?
Snowtown Murders. Yeah.
The Bodies in Barrels.
Yeah. It's pretty.
Right.
Killing for Pleasure was already gone. So, as in when I say gone, the rights were gone. There were other people trying to make movies. Funny enough.
Got you.
But
Okay.
Yeah.
So you read the other one, and
I did.
That was 2007. Written as a hobby for many years beforehand. I think you were still a teacher.
I was studying screenwriting at nights. I was working full time, studying at nights, and then writing Snowtown on weekends.
There you go. I studied at the RMIT in creative screenwriting. You did the same course.
Yeah, I did.
You obviously did something with yours.
Anyway,
so there you, 2007, Crossroads. 4 years later, 2011, your first feature film has an international premiere at the Cannes Film Festival. I would suggest, Shaun, in anybody's experience or measure, that is a phenomenal kind of
Oh,
thing to have occurred.
yeah,
For those
fully aware.
writers and people who are listening, other than obviously a talent that you have and was recognized, what did you do to make that happen? Because you obviously contributed to that happening. That wasn't by random. What did you do once you had read the book? You had the
Well, the reading of
experience.
the book's a good story because I was never a believer in fate until the night I first read that book. So I'm in country Victoria, babysitting my 2-year-old niece at the time, and it's a Friday night. I've just put her to bed. It's 8:30. I'm ready to watch the footy or whatever it may be that I was going to watch, probably footy, and power went out. And it was too early to go to sleep. So I lit a candle. I'm in my brother's home. My brother and I are fundamentally different in many ways, one of which is he loves true crime. And I don't read true crime, funny enough. Never did until this night. And I scan his bookshelf and it's just a litany of serial killers. And as I tell all my American friends, that they win in that regard because they're mostly American. But there was one and it was the Snowtown Murders. And I took it off the shelf and I read it by candlelight in the night. And by the end of that book, and in particular, there's like on chapter 4, it starts something along the lines of Jamie Vlasakis was born December 20, 1979, and we were only a few months apart. So I did that sort of bad TV movie thing where if I had, been swapped in the hospital as babies, and I had lived his life and he had lived mine, and if I had been sexually abused from the age of, dot all throughout his life, would I have killed 4 people like he did? And the answer scared me. And I thought, if I can pose that to an audience, that's an interesting film. So yeah, I finished that book. I went in, it was actually, and then there was one of my lecturers at RMIT was Ian Pringle. I don't know if you know Ian.
Totally. Yes, he was one of mine.
So he had an adaptation class, and you had to do the first 10 pages of film, which you probably did when you were there too. And I did the first 10 pages of Snowtown, and I was pretty happy with them. And I said, look, I'm actually, because I was working full time, I said, I've got a bit of money in my pocket. I think I'm going to get the rights to this book and give it an actual crack. And he said, well, let me read it and I'll see. So I sat at his desk. He read 10 pages while I sat in front of him, and he looked up and he said, I think you've got something here. I'd get on the phone. So I knew no one. I rang the agent of the author and I haggled as best as I could haggle and got the rights. And then, which was great because, I'd spent money. So I had a deadline. I only had the rights for 2 years or something. So I wrote crazily. Film Victoria read it and thought it was really good. So went away and did some more work. And then I went, and then I just watched films that I really liked. Like, as I said, I knew absolutely no one. I didn't know a best boy. I didn't know a caterer. I knew no one in the film industry. So I watched films that I liked that were Australian. I wrote down the producers' names. I think there were 4 of them. I got them from the old Encore directory, which I don't know if they've still got or not, but in the RMIT library. And I rang all 4, said, look, you don't know me. No one knows me. My name's Shaun Grant. I'm a school teacher, but I've written this movie called Snowtown. And I think it helped that it was a thing, like it was a true story, and they were kind of their ears pricked up. And I said, would you like to read it? And they all said yes, because fundamentally, I believe, particularly now more than ever, where content is so devoured and there's such a need for it, producers want stories. Like they're crying out for them. So they're always on the hunt. It's just got to be good enough to really get their attention, hopefully. So I rang them. They all read it. They all said, love to meet you for a coffee. 3, I met all 4. 3 of their 4 said it's just too dark. It's beautifully written, but I can't go into that world for the next 7 years, which is on average how long it takes, even though this one was quicker. But and I understood because it took a lot out of me. But then, one of the producers, Anna McLeish, said, let's do it. And we'd made the film in the space of 3 years, and we were at Cannes. And I know how fortunate I am because I've spent the best part of 6 years living in Los Angeles, and I go to meetings. I'm in, I don't know, let's say the Marvel office, talking about a Marvel movie or something, and the guy bringing me coffee is a Harvard graduate. Like you have to, in that town, no one does that. It's very rare. You don't jump to, oh, you're nobody, to here's the thing. Normally you just, particularly writers, you have to go step by step by step, bring coffee, take notes. You might write it one episode or something, you work your way up. So I kind of jumped a whole lot of those. I've never been a note taker. I've never, all these roles underneath I've never done. I just jumped into Snowtown, and then I haven't been unemployed since, touch wood. So yeah, very grateful in that regard.
The relationship between you and Justin Kurzel, who's the director, and you've worked on 3 projects now, Nitram being the latest one, which we'll get to. How did that play out? Because that was his first film, your first film. How did that relationship come about? And I've also heard you talk about collaboration and saying he's one of the greatest collaborators that one of the greatest filmmaker collaborators. Can you talk about how that happened when you met, why that felt right, and then how that relationship has continued to grow and develop?
We met in Collingwood at a cafe. Anna, Sarah, the other producer, and myself. We had this script that we thought was pretty great. We wanted to make it. We had a short list of some. To their credit, they were the ones watching the short films that knew the next up and comers. And we had a short list, and I met with a few directors, Justin being one of them. And within 2 minutes of the meeting, I'd always take a little book to these meetings with directors, which I still kind of do if I'm like, I don't like using the word auditioning, but if I'm sort of meeting with them to see if they're to direct a script of mine. And within 2 minutes, Justin said 2 things. One was the script where it felt so real, like you said, like there was no fat on it. It just felt very much, and so he knew it felt real because he grew up in the area. So he grew up in South Australia, in Gawler, which is just next to where North Salisbury and Elizabeth, these places where the murders took place. So that got my interest because I'm a Victorian. I went, oh, great. Well, I don't know the area, so that's great. And then he said, and it felt so real that I want to cast people from the area and not trained actors. And I was like, I think, to make it almost like, I love your Ken Loach type films, Mike Lee, that sort of cinema was what I grew up on. So I got super excited. I did say, look, I think there's one man that drives all the action, and that's John Bunting. And I think an actor is required to do that. But everyone else is reacting essentially to John, which I think non-actors or non-trained actors can react. I think it's much harder for them to drive action. And he was like, yeah, no, you're 100% right. And then we just sort of hit it up. We didn't know each other until then. And it's crazy to think 10 years later, we've done 3 films and, hopefully there's more down the track. But it was just, writing's an exceptionally lonely profession. And I don't share my work with a lot of people. So it's nice to have someone on your side and someone who's, I guess our tastes and sensibilities, while we're different in lots of ways, I think our pros and cons kind of weigh each other out and we bring different things to the table. I think fundamentally our tastes are not dissimilar. And we kind of, fight the fight together. I mean, we make the films we've made thus far are exceptionally challenging, like Australia's Worst Serial Killer, Australia's biggest icon who we throw in a dress, and I guess Australia's most hated man, essentially the new one. So it's exhausting. It's, and you're in the trenches. It's a fight. You're pushing shit uphill, for want of a better word. And, he's got my back and I've got his. And that can't always be said in this industry. Writers get pushed on in terms of the collaboration, like, so often writers are just brought on, you mind them of their ideas, you take their ideas and you can push them off and bring on a new one to do it as well. Justin doesn't do that. We kind of go, no, actually the person that created it, the person that knows the story better than anyone is the one that should see it through to the end. So,
do you know, Shaun, it's 16th Street as a studio. We've been, since really we started, bringing some of, I think, the really greatest acting teachers to Australia and finding them within Australia as well, no question about that. But Larry Moss, who's an acting teacher,
yes. I know all my active friends and partners and wife. Yes, mention Larry. He's a god. Yes,
he is, and he speaks about the writer and holds the writer. That's one of the things he does with actors, is really say it's the play, it's the piece of work, it's the story, it's the writer, it's everything central. not you. You're there in service of. So that's very much kind of primacy. And what I heard you say when you spoke about Justin, I thought this was interesting, the notion of collaboration, and that you said it's really at the behest of the director. And if they can get out of their own way and their ego out of their own way, they are much richer. The experience is much richer.
Absolutely.
If they can do that and really collaborate. Can you talk about what a really good collaboration looks like between you as a writer and a director? And you can use that example if you like, obviously, Justin, but what does it look like when it's really cooking?
Well, I'll tell you what, I remember writing Berlin Syndrome and film, was it film? No, maybe it was Screen Australia. There was a rule that they had or something. It was like, you have to have a script editor. And it was $3,000 or something. And I was like, well, no, actually, I would want to use that money and go to Berlin because I think it would really assist the script. And I love Berlin and why not? But, you know, mostly for the script. And they were adamant. I could not do that. You have to follow the rules and have a script editor. So I did and didn't do what I planned. And my point to them in a discussion / argument that I had was that, you know, that was a film with Kate Shortland. You know, I had producers already on. Like a great director is, and a great producer for that matter, is just, you know, that idea of a script editor. To me, it is someone that can bounce off. You know, obviously they put maybe more in than maybe a script editor would, but, you know, it is just the best sounding board. So typically how it works is Justin and I will, you know, it depends on the different projects. Snowtown and NitRam, they were spec scripts. So I wrote them on my own for no money and then just kind of knocked on doors and tried to get them made and sent them to Juz. Kelly Gang was a book, so it was probably more. But even along the journey, it was just, I write stuff, give me your thoughts. What are your, you know, how can we make this better? And he's just wonderful. Like, he's really good at detail. He's very visual, obviously. And he's able to do that. But it's also, you know, he can just cut through things in the same way I think I am when someone would bring me something. You know, it's just, you just want someone with really good taste, that's really smart, giving you feedback. And he's the best that I've found for my work. Like, he just, you know, I've worked with a stack of producers in television and film and multiple directors, but he's just excellent at knowing what is needed and what isn't. So yeah, it's just a dialogue, and it's just being able to have absolutely no ego, swallow your pride, fight. And he knows, like, I'm not one, there's writers out there that give writers a bad name that are like, you can't change a word, every word is perfect. I'm not that guy, and he knows that. So if I'm pushing hard against something, he knows, oh, actually, I better rethink it because maybe he's right. Because I'll always go, oh yeah, that could work. And I never quite understand the idea of not having people around, like directors not wanting the writer there as often as possible, because they, I would imagine, would only make it better, unless they're one of those writers that I mentioned that are just so fastidious. But and you get the credit for it, you know. Like, it's like when an actor makes up a line in one of my films, you know, and they're, you know, I've spoken to actors and they're like, is that okay? I was like, mate, do it my way, do it your way, do it whatever way. We've got the edit to find the best way. And if the best way is what you just said, then it will make the film. And my ego is not going to get in the way and say, because it's not my line, it can't. Because at the end of the day, they're going to think I wrote that line. Like I've had people quote lines of my films. I was like, oh yeah, that was great. I didn't write it, but you know. And it's the same with the director. You know, if it's a writer's idea that to go into it, then put it up there, because you'll get the credit for it anyway. I mean, I read film reviews where the writer's not mentioned. I think if that is absolutely appalling. It happens all the time, because the directors, you know, this God type figure. So you're going to get the credit. No one's ever not going to get the credit, you know, for what they do. And I think Justin's learned that a little bit too. He'll be the first to say you know, he got in the way of himself a little bit early on, and we clashed a little bit on Snowtown. And now, you know, you just get more comfortable in your skin. So I've worked with first-time directors. I've worked with David Fincher, you know, and it's funny, the higher up you go, the less self-involved they become. Like, I always thought, if you had these crazy runs on the board, your ego would get in the way. It's actually, you become more open because you're very comfortable in yourself. And it's when you're trying to climb the ladder that you get, the backstabbing and the ego gets in the way. So,
Have you seen a lot of that, Shaun? You kind of alluded to some.
More than I wish. Yeah, more than I wish. Painful. Writing is, I feel like acting would probably have that too. You'd have actors on set that would drive you mad, but writing, particularly because you start from the absolute ground floor and do all this work, and then anyone can come in and egos come in and yeah, you can just be cast aside so very, very easily. I don't think there was a job in my career where I hadn't been fucked over in some way, somewhere along the line. Maybe the most recent film is an exception. But yeah, you absolutely get worn down by it. Because, I get it. Everyone wants their moment. Everyone wants to have their 2 cents worth. But, and it's just tough. It's just a real brutal business. Like, you're in television and no, they don't have time, or, they're getting notes from the station or the network, and they're like, no, it's easier just to move on rather than talk it through. And you're like, oh, okay. But look, I get paid for it. It's not the end of the world. It's quite tricky. It's hard to watch. Like, there's a film just came out in the States this weekend called The Last Duel. Ridley Scott directed, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck wrote it. And I wrote the first version of that film. And I got, in a roundabout way, had got replaced by 2 exceptionally famous people whose last screenplay they wrote was Good Will Hunting, which I adore. So that's a fun story, but it's a perfect example of, you work on a film. I worked on that film for a year and something. And the film that's on screen, I don't know, because they just I was doing it with the director of the Hunger Games, and it just never got made. Like 98% of things just doesn't get made. And you just get cast aside and you dust yourself off and you put your heart and soul into it. And I've been very fortunate to have 6 films made in a decade or something, which is kind of unheard of strike rate. But I've got even more that haven't. So, it's like acting. It's like not getting an audition, and you just dust yourself off. And I'm a big believer in, what's the quote? If it is for you, it shall not pass you by. And I tell my wife, who's an actress, and I tell all my actor friends, like, the ones that are for you will land. And for whatever reason, yeah, I think that fate day with the candle made me sort of learn that the universe is kind of in control of a lot of things. You can put in all the hard work, be prepared, but at the end of the day, there's a bit of that Forrest Gump feathering blowing in the wind sort of thing. You land where you're supposed to land.
Right. I think that's great. And I really agree with that. There's something when you spoke about, obviously, because I know your wife, she's a beautiful actress, and Justin Kurzel.
Saw her in Knit Ram?
Yes. I totally saw her in Knit Ram. And I saw Judy Davis's daughter in Knit Ram.
Yeah. Oh, yes, you were watching. Yeah.
Charlotte was there.
Charlotte was.
But when, and Essie Davis, who's obviously married to Justin.
Yeah, it was a family affair.
Yeah, you're very blessed to be a writer and a director and understand probably very intimately about the actor process as well. So when you write something and there it is on page, and then an actor comes along, both at an audition, and, when they get the job and away they go and they bring it to the screen through their performance, what would you say that really good, fine actors do, both when they come to the material just maybe as an audition, and then what they might do when they've got it and they digest and they've got time and they bring something through the kind of full force of their performance? What would you say that relationship is between what's on the page and what they bring to it?
Watching auditions of your screenplays is the most painful experience for 80% of it that a writer can have. Like, it is, I can't, and it's absolutely no fault of the actors, because I'm a big believer in, you're made for certain roles. Like, I think there's the Daniel Day-Lewis's of the world who could probably play anything, lunch ladies and everything in between. And then I think the rest of us, mere mortals, can do certain things. And I think the same is to writers. I think the same is to direct. I don't think directors can do all gamuts. There's certain, I can't think of many directors that can do all genres. I can't think of many writers that could write a sitcom and could write a feature film. And acting to me is the same. The role finds you as much as you find the role, sort of thing. But so yeah, so you watch them and you're going, oh God, have I written? Is this script just a man? And then an actor will come, and you'll go, oh no, actually, it's the writing's kind of great. Yeah, it's oh my God, it's great. I remember Snowtown was one in particular, and probably it stands out in my mind. Because I guess we did more auditions, Kelly Gang, Berlin Syndrome, they go to your Teresa Palmers or your Russell Crowes or whatever, and there's not this huge audition. Snowtown, Dan Henschel was a nobody. I think he'd done a Telstra commercial or something at the time. So we saw so many actors, and Justin, talking about collaboration, had me watch every audition. And so we saw a lot of Aussie actors, everyone on Home and Away and everyone in between. And it was, they just weren't right. And then Daniel's audition, his first ever audition, is still hands down the best audition I've ever seen in my life. And I guess, and it's dependent on what you're writing, I guess. But for me, I write, fairly naturalistic sort of stuff, like films that I really resonate with. I mean, I'll watch anything, and I like a superhero film and all that. But what I love is when I feel like I'm watching real life on screen, where I don't see the direction, I don't see the acting. It is just, I'm seeing myself back on screen. So yeah, that's kind of what Daniel did. He brought a warmth to it that was really, really important. I think, trouble with these sort of things, be it Knit-Ram or Snowtown or Mindhunter sometimes, perfect example, my good friend Damon Herriman was cast in Mindhunter, and he did audition. I didn't see his audition, but his table readers, Charles Manson, gave me chills. Like, he just inhabits it and makes it so effortless and natural. All these words, which are really probably frustrating for actors to hear, because you're like, how do I do that? And it's really difficult how to do that. But I guess my biggest thing is trust the words. Let the words do the work. Because if they're good enough, they will. And if they're not, then you can always blame the words, And sometimes you've got to force it because you're like, I've got a stinker. This is a dog with fleas, but I've got to bring something to it. Like, yeah. And, so many of my friends get those scripts, and I have to, as a reasonably, someone who considers himself a half decent writer, some of the things I have to bloody read on the other side of the camera sometimes for auditions breaks my heart. But if it's good, trust in that, and just trust in the words. I think actors, like directors, like all of us, can get in the way of themselves sometimes and think, I've got 3 minutes to show them everything I can do. And it just gets in the way of things. It's like really just focus in on, really try to connect with what you connect most with that character. I think is really important. So that's the same thing as I do when I write. I'm like, okay, Berlin Syndrome. I'm reading a book. It's about a woman who is trapped in an apartment. Okay, never done that. I've never been the trappee, and I've never trapped anyone in an apartment. But I tell you what, I'm a big believer in when relationships end. I don't believe in this. Oh, it was mutual. That's utter bullshit. Someone wants to go, someone wants them to stay, in my opinion. Might be 51, 49%, but it's never 50. So I felt that. So I could connect that. So I think as an actor, really get a character and go, what in part of my psyche, of my life, am I most like this person? And fundamentally lean into that aspect of the character. Don't try to play all the colors, because I think it actually sometimes you will get caught up and lost, and you watch it as an audition and you go, I actually don't know what that is. And I think, I'm very understanding in that when I see an audition, I don't expect it to be absolutely perfect either. Like Dan's was pretty good, and to be perfectly honest, progressively got worse the longer he had with the material and the more that he got into the character. And we actually had to keep going back. It was very much came down to the wire between Dan and another actor for that role. And the other actors was getting better through the auditions, and Dan necessarily wasn't. But his first one was the film. It was so, so good. We had to trust in that could be found again on set. And I don't know why that was, but I do think sometimes you just, it's really hard. Sometimes you want it too much as well. When he knows that role was going to change his life. Like, I didn't know much about Snowtown, but I knew I'd written 2 amazing roles for 2 actors, the boy and John. And he knew it was, so I think he just wanted it too much in a way. But yeah, I think, I'm a big believer, and it's not for everyone. If you're doing a really broad comedy, maybe it doesn't always work. Though even then, I do think if the lines are funny, let them be funny. You don't need to, I mean, I love Jim Carrey, but I don't think we all can do what he does. I think just, I'm a big believer in just trying to maintain some truth. And I think it's hard to be true. Like, I see, I watch a lot of television, and my biggest issue is television is I see acting a lot.
Yeah.
I see actors acting all the time, and I know they have so little time to work on it. Like, I think most films can do that better because of the time factor. So I grant them, but I also think that there's TV acting, and you kind of just play into it a little bit much, and it distracts me. It just pulls me out so much.
And
that's probably why I don't watch much of it.
And I'll say that, and going in, watching the films you've written, you are just absolutely, I found myself being pulled in. I've actually been quite kind of very vulnerable the last couple of days, actually, because I've been doing quite a lot of watching these films. And I thought it was interesting when you and Justin spoke about meeting Caleb Landry Jones, who's an American. I mean, it's unbelievable. You cannot believe for a nanosecond. I mean, I don't think Meryl Streep was able to imbibe a kind of...
No way. Oh, well, I know. Yeah, I know that role. No, I mean, that was the thing. I said when we met him in LA when I was living there, and he walked in, and I knew, like, I've always said it's the hardest accent in the world to do.
Yeah, great.
Like, Meryl couldn't do it.
No.
And I reckon this is about the second thing Caleb said to us was, I'm not very good at accents, sort of thing. And we're like, okay, that doesn't make us nervous at all. But he, like, perfect example of someone who just found a connection with the character. There was, like, obviously never done anything along the lines of this, but there was what I loved most about Caleb in this, we had breakfast, and I walked out and said, well, that's the guy. Like, we had to go and meet another actor. And I knew it was a waste of time because I was so adamant. In the same way I walked out of the first meeting with Justin and said, he's the director.
Right.
He kind of demanded that the producers make the call to lock him in. I said to Justin, Caleb's the guy, like, he is. And for me, the Nitram character is childlike. Like, the perpetrator had an IQ of, a 12-year-old sort of thing. Like, there is a childlike behavior to him. And Caleb has that childlike sensibility. He is a big kid in so many ways, yet exceptionally astute when it came to scripts. Like, I remember that first meeting, him going, oh, this line jarred with me. Of the whole script, he said it was the only line that jarred with me, and it was a line I took from an interrogation of the perpetrator after the fact and tried to place it in the script because it was a really interesting line that I liked from it. And he was like, yeah, it just didn't feel like it belonged in that place. And I was like, well, yeah, because it wasn't in that place. And I took it out of the script. Like, he was that astute while having this childlike naivety to him. And it's like, that's when I go, the role finds you. It's like, I mean, we loved Caleb's work, and he'd done, been in some great films, but it was like, no, you are that person. That's why, Nitram, we've got non-actors around actors. Snowtown, we did the same to an even more degree, but we're casting, the gun salesman had been a gun salesman in Nitram. The travel agent had been a travel agent. It's like, I think you can, if I had to play a screenwriter, I think I could do it to some acclaim, perhaps, but I couldn't do anything else. I think because you are, you know, it's taking on your experiences and connecting the character to who you are as a person. And yeah, and I've seen it with non-actors. And, you know, Judy Davis was nervous acting the doctor scene. That was a doctor in Geelong. And Judy was nervous on the day because she's never worked really with a non-actor before. And he knew everything about, you know, medicine, which was really sweet because the doctor was just sweating bullets to be sitting opposite Judy Davis. So yeah, it's really interesting to watch the acting process when having, you know, an Oscar nominee, or I don't know, Judy has won one. I know
she has won. She won for Passage to India, I think.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So you've got an Oscar winner next to a guy that is the first time he'd ever done it. So yeah, it's really interesting.
And I just want to say to everybody, some of you might be too young or may not have been alive, but this film that has been already released in non-lockdown states in Australia and is going to be, I think, released Stan end of November, and obviously get more of a cinematic release around Australia.
I know we're exchanging emails with my fellow producers today about when in Melbourne, because I want, you know, so many of my family and friends live in Victoria. And I think cinemas are going to open up probably around Melbourne Cup-ish. That's right. The word on the street. So yeah, no, Knit will be in cinemas soon as they're open. So.
And I just say to everybody, and I haven't been asked to say this by Shaun, but really do yourselves a favour. Absolutely 100% go and see that film. And also Snowtown, which was your first film. I would highly recommend people watch that as well, because that work was just impeccable. And I think it's been called, actually, Shaun, you probably know this, but a masterpiece of truth and naturalism. And indeed it was. So what I want to do now is bring everybody onto the screen just for a little bit, if we can, Shaun, and just open it up to some questions from everybody watching. So everybody come on. Hello. Oh, Jess Watt, how gorgeous to see you. Hello, darling. Hello, everybody. Hi, Lachlan. Hello, hello, hello. Everybody's coming on. Great. And what we'll do, everybody, is if you've got a question, I can see there's one, Adam, ready to go with you first. Just put your hand up and I'll do the best I can to facilitate a little bit of a dialogue between you and with Shaun. Where are you, Shaun? There he is.
Back to my school days, Kim. With putting
I know. I was a teacher, I'm sure, in a past life, because as a small child, I used to tell everybody they could come back to my place and have a swim. But before they had this swim, we had to play school again at the end of a long day. And they actually did it, God knows. All right, everybody. So let's rock and roll with you first, Adam, and then we'll go to you, Janet, and then Patrick Verlin. Away you go, Adam.
Fantastic. Hi, Shaun. Thanks so much for spending time with us. I'm a big fan of Snowtown. I think it's one of Australia's greatest films, in my opinion, and I've drawn a lot of inspiration for it. I'm currently writing a feature script at the moment, and I definitely resonate with when you say that writing's a very lonely proposition. And what I was curious to know was, in terms of the most pivotal steps of developing Snowtown, I know that you happened to do a writing retreat, and you were also at uni doing a screenwriting course. What were the most, I guess, important aspects of developing that story, what they were, and how did you innately know that the script was finished and ready to shop around?
Yeah, so the most important things, the workshop that I did was useful, but it didn't make the film. I'd actually already had the producer on board. It really was, it really is just doing it. I mean, at the end of the day, I had no right to think that I could do it, but I'd kind of, like, I was raised in a pub, one of those classic stories of, it was a hotel motel, and with the motel came a video store. So I spent my entire life watching movies and handing out movies to people. So I just felt that I knew the story, and that's kind of what I do when I write everything. It's really not useful, probably, because there's no rhyme nor reason as to when it's done, but I kind of know it's done. I know it's done and I know it's not done. So I'm a big believer in deadlines. Too many writers get caught up in their head with, it's not perfect yet. Nothing's perfect. I've never written a perfect screenplay. I've never seen a perfect film. Like, the things can always change and be better, but at some stage you've got to bite the bullet and get it out there. And it will improve with other people's thoughts and other people's eyes and co-collaborators, and, you know. So I think you do the absolute best you can. That's what kind of helped with getting the rights to a Snowtown, to a book, was that it gave me a deadline. Like, I was going to lose the option if I did sort of do something. So I think deadlines are really important. And you know, I'm a self-employed freelance screenwriter. I have to make my own deadlines. I have to get up and sit at the desk at 9, and I have to deliver things when I'm, you know, say they're going to deliver them. And even more so in like a NitRam, you know, I wrote the first draft of that script in 5 weeks because I only had 5 weeks spare. It was the first 5-week period I've had in a decade where I wasn't employed on another job. And I'd had the idea in my head for 10 years. And I just, for whatever reason, never sat down and did it. And then I just went, this is it. This is my time. I'm going to do it. I'm going to see what it looks like at the end of it, and I'm going to send it. And Justin didn't know I was writing it, and I texted him and I said, check your inbox. And yeah, he took a deep breath and read it. But yeah, you know, it's really, you know, yeah, you've just got to get it to a place where you're comfortable with someone seeing it, but don't think it's ever going to be perfect, because it's just not. And I see too many writers, like, as I said, I got a lot of active friends, and a lot of actors write, and they never share it. They never get it out there. And I was like, you know, that's fine if it's the process that you're interested in. And I'm a big believer in that. Like, I remember when I got the rights to Snowtown, and I'm a massive pessimist. I never, you know, my mother's Scottish and miserable, and it's come down on me, as most Scotsmen are. And so I'm a pessimist. So I write scripts going, probably won't get made. No one will ever see it. But if you write it anyway, if the process of writing it is enough for you, then you can't lose. So I knew writing Snowtown that there were 2 other more established filmmakers trying to do a Snowtown film, and it still didn't put me off, because I said, no, I have to tell this story. I just have to tell it. NitRam was the same. It was like, okay, I'm taking fundamentally the most controversial subject matter in Australia, where screen bodies don't fund me, and I go, fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway, because I have to tell the story. And if it doesn't get made or no one sees it, that's okay, because the process of it, I wouldn't say enjoy, because actually it can be like pulling teeth, but I know I'll get something out of it. I know I'll learn. I know I'll challenge myself. So if you're writing something, just, yeah, you know, there's too many people are like, oh, you know, I'm writing it because I want to act in it. And I was like, okay, that's fine. But is the story enough for you? Because if you're writing it just to act in it, 99% of the things don't get made. So that's going to be disappointing. So I get writing yourself a role, but you've got to be passionate enough about the story that if it doesn't get made, you go, well, it's not a waste of time. Because as I said, I've done a lot of stuff that's not been made, and I never see it as a waste of time, because I learned something along the way.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for that question, Adam. Janet, over to you, love. And you're on mute, darling.
Shaun, thank you so much. This is wonderful. I two-time as an actor and an emerging writer, and I'm working on 2 projects. One is a joyful teen young adult series, and one is a really serious feature film. Have you got any advice about? Yeah, have you got any advice about two-timing?
Yeah, absolutely. I do it all the time. My wife may be listening. That sounds bad. No, when it comes to writing, I think what you're doing is 100% correct. I do it all the time. I'm notorious for having 2 projects on the go, at least, because, as I say to people, my brother is bipolar, and I consider myself creatively bipolar. So I'll get up and the world is a bad place. And a perfect example actually is Berlin Syndrome and Jasper Jones. I wrote concurrently from almost, I think the books came to me in the same day or the same week. And I had to decide, and I read them both, and I was like, producers are waiting on me to make a call. Which one am I going to do? And I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do both, because I liked them both. And we went through every funding round at Screen Australia together. They shot weeks apart. They came out in cinemas a couple of months apart. And it was a coming of age. Like I tell people, Jasper Jones is my light, my fun coming of age story. I remember talking, and because it didn't travel to America as well, so they don't know it. And they're like, oh, really? What's it about? I said, well, it starts with a 14-year-old girl who's been abused hanging herself. And they're like, oh, that's the light one. But it was my light one next to Berlin Syndrome. And when I felt like I could write some kids joking and playing cricket, I would write Jasper Jones. And when I felt that, my mental health wasn't great, or I was down on the world and myself or whatever, I would lock Theresa Palmer in a room and not let her out. And I think it's a good thing, because I don't believe in writer's block, to be frank. People ask me if I get it, and I was like, no, I just write bad stuff. Like, I know when it's bad, I can feel it. I know when I'm not creative, or it's just not in sync or whatever. But if you sit and wait for inspiration, you can wait forever. So it's like, just do it, get through it. It's, they talk about screenwriting as the one job where you throw out more than you keep. Normally you don't build a house and throw more out than you keep. But with screenwriting, it's true. To get 100 pages, you've probably written 200, and you have to just keep throwing it out and changing it. So yeah, to have different genres, different tones, I think is a useful thing to do. I don't necessarily go, I'm going to spend an hour on this today and an hour on that. I normally need a few days or a week on one, and then I'll swap over. But at least I'll know it's there. So if I'm stuck on Berlin Syndrome, I'll go, it's just not working. I'm going to go reread Jasper Jones and see if I can get into that world. Or, I'm writing a couple of things at the moment that are different. So I think it's really wise what you're doing. And just go where you're inspired. And when you're stuck, and I understand that there's stuck, but I don't think that's writer's block. You just, unless you lose your hands, you can write. It's just going to be awful, and that's okay. You got to write out the bad sometimes. I do that all the time. And I don't think it's a waste.
Thank you, Jenna, for that question. Patrick Verlin.
Thank you so much today, Shaun. It's been very insightful for me. You said that you don't like sharing your writing with too many people. I'm currently at film school, and a big part of my studies is sharing and learning to take feedback. I was wondering if you could discuss your relationship with this and how you found the people to trust.
Yeah, it took a while. I mean, I have a very small posse, I guess, that I would share it with. I think it's just finding a sensibility, because everyone's got an opinion, and there's nothing to say any of them are wrong, but you want to make what you want to make. So I think in some way, they'll be slightly different to you, but you kind of got to be on the same wavelength. You've got to understand, you've got to like the same things, because everyone's got opinions. And I actually think too many opinions is what gets in the way of things. Development that lasts forever gets in the way. I think television, a big issue is you've got, 8 different people at studio levels and beyond giving notes, and you get this hybrid bastard child of a thing, and it's not pure of true to intention. So I say, keep your, film school, you got to share it. That's so fine. I don't care who reads, well, I do care who reads my stuff, but I'm happy to hear opinions. I just sift through them. And if I don't believe and I don't agree with it, I just ignore it. I've a million times gotten notes and haven't changed them and sent it back. But personally, outside of film school, I would, trust who you trust, keep it small so you don't have 1,000 different things coming at you. And and base it on those, but really listen to notes, because they're exceptionally important. Because you can't, when you're in it, you can't see the forest for the trees. You need, like, I've done so much research when I do these things, and someone will go, I didn't understand that. And I have to go, well, it's because of this. But I can't get the audience to read 6 books on Port Arthur Massacre. And so I'm like, oh, okay, so you are the audience. I actually have to listen to your notes and I have to adjust it accordingly because of it. So, you know, I'm all for opinion, but take on those that you really, really trust and be strong in standing up for yourself if you think the opinion's wrong. I know I am.
Thanks, Shaun. That's really helpful. Thank you, Patrick, for that question. Sandra Skabiris.
Well, hello, Kim.
Hello.
Hello, everybody at 16. So, Shaun, I'm a writer.
Hey, Sandra.
Hello, Shaun. Actually, funny enough, I interviewed Justin Kurzer when he popped into VCA Film School a few years ago now.
Right.
And we did bring up a kind of similar question I'm about to ask you. Rehearsals, where, I mean, you know, your work, you know, your style of writing and the way we've talked about actors, the way you've talked about actors, how do you fit in that kind of rehearsal period? And then how do you fit in the production part of it? Where do you,
it depends. I know Berlin Syndrome, there was a lot of rehearsals between Max and Teresa, two-hander. You know, it could be done and it was easy to do. Kelly Gang, there were none. You know, it was a huge cast. We had Russell for a week. We have Nick Holt flying in, Charlie Hannon. It was just impossible. So I don't even think there was a table read, to be frank. And when working with the non-actors, Nitram and Snowtown, or some you know, part of the cast non-actors, there's none as well. Justin doesn't like them and it just gets in the way. So it's a really, I presume that's kind of maybe what he said to you when you asked, but other than Berlin was one that comes to mind, there was a long rehearsal process. I haven't been on one. I mean, you know what it's like making a film in this country.
There's like, do you go on set at all?
Yeah.
So you're there, you're watching, you're participating in that way. And
depending on the film, Jasper was shot in WA, and I turned up for maybe a day or something to say hi and thank everyone for their work they're putting in. But Nitram, I was on set every day. I was a producer on it. Kelly Gang was the same. So it's my preference to be there, but sometimes it's the behest of the director. Sometimes it's where it's shooting. Sometimes it's how much work I've got on. But I think there's certainly on the sets I've been, there's an openness to play, and you know, kind of as you would do in a rehearsal, I guess, in a way, like, okay, do it this way, you know. Let's try something different here. But I don't know, I worry about rehearsal. I know, like Mindhunters, for example. So David, you know, is notorious for, you know, 300 takes sort of stuff. I think it's crazy. I mean, I love his films. I still think it's crazy. I mean, what he puts actors through is just torturous, you know, talking to Damon and that.
Obviously, your writing speaks for itself, and you did talk about, you know, you did mention two of the greatest filmmakers, Ken Loach and Mike. And
they play, you know, they play the process. I mean, I know, you know, from what I've read of writing with an actor and, you know, developing the character with them and all of that. I mean, that's really interesting if you get the actors in so early on. It would frustrate me when I'm writing. I'm like, I block things out. I'm not doing that as much. But you know, it's to each their own. I think I worry that you say it too many times and it loses some of that immediacy. Like, so often I think the best takes are the first couple. You know, Clint Eastwood's notorious for that. He'll do like one or two and he's like, yeah, done. David's the opposite, but you know, to each your own.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sandra. Now, I'm very mindful of time, everyone, so I'm going to do my best, but if you hear a question that's asked that is so close to yours, maybe lower the little hand. I'm going to go to James Frush. How are you, James?
Hi there. Hi, Shaun. I get
James.
Curious about your how much you outline and your process in terms of where you are before you start writing, and what triggers you to flip the switch to transition from planning to writing?
Yeah, I'm pretty detailed in that. If I'm known for anything, I think I'm known for really, really solid first drafts. It's probably because I outline so in depth. And I mainly do it just because it saves time. In the end, it saves time. Because I've tried to write scripts just by the seat of my pants, and you just throw out like way more than you needed to. So I kind of, beat everything out. I'll card up the film. I'll go scene by scene, I may have, I don't know, 60 cards on my window. And then once I feel comfortable, then I'll turn it into a treatment. So I'll write it as prose. That could be anything from 7 pages to 15 to 30 pages long, like a short story. And then I start writing the script. So it's a fair bit to do before I do page 1. Sometimes I might be mid-card, I've carded the first act and I'm just like, fuck, it's just not the same as getting characters talking. Like there's a joy and freedom to that. And I might go, okay, I'm going to write the first 5 pages just because I need to fall in love with writing again, because the structure of things can be quite academic and scientific in a way. So I might write a bit, but then I'm going to stop and I'm going to go back and finish my carding. And then I'm going to finish the cards, start the treatment and stop, because treatments are awful. They're awful to read. They're kind of awful to write in a way. And you go, okay, now I'm going to write a bit more of the script. Just, you've got to be enjoying it, because if you're not going to do it. So, but yeah, outlining, planning, doing all the heavy lifting first, like that's the hardest stuff. So I'm a big believer in doing a lot of that first.
Thank you.
Ripper. Right. Now, we've got time, because I did promise Shaun he's done a 15K run today.
Run, walk, let's say, but yeah. Yeah,
from Mount Martha to the Dramana Pier. This man is in desperate need of either meditation or a glass of wine. So what I'd like to just suggest, we have one more question. So here's the go, Shaun. You've got Tamara, Lachlan, Lana, or Ben. I'm going to get you to make a choice, because I just can't.
Jesus.
Yeah, I had to just throw you in it.
Okay. I don't know. Tamara was the first name that I heard, I think.
There you go.
Thank you. Sorry, guys.
and also, yes, Janan, Loki. Okay, let's go with you first, darling. Let's do you exactly as you requested.
Alrighty. So, thank you so much, Shaun. It's been really great to hear you talk. I'm an aspiring screenwriter, and I'm also about to graduate film school from Swinburne Uni. And I was just wondering what your advice would be to young filmmakers, screenwriters trying to get out there, and how to get your stories heard, and what's the best way to go about doing that?
I would say write something really, really good is the hardest thing to do, but the most important thing to do. Because as I said, we are in an age, television in particular, I find, where content is required at the moment, and producers are desperate for it. So if you've got an absolute brilliant idea, they will jump at it. I promise you that. But get something, I guess that's what I did. I wrote something that I thought was really, really strong. And then I reached out to those people whose product I liked, and hoped for the best. That's the most important thing, just doing it. Because if you wait to get a tap on the shoulder, some miraculous meeting's going to happen, it's just not going to happen. You just, what is it? Opportunity meets, hard work or preparation or something along those lines. So, I think, and like networking can be an important thing as well. Like, having spent the past 6 years in LA, I'm not a big, let's go and talk about movies all the time. Like, I like talking about other things and life and stuff. And so the whole networking thing can be a bit too much for me, but I do think finding your people that you can hopefully co-collaborate with and make things together and help each other on each other's films or TV shows is an important thing. So, which can be tough because it's not so much me, but a lot of writers are introverts and don't like to get out there and mingle. And that's actually a really important part. Like if you're a novelist, you can be the biggest introvert in the world. But if you're a filmmaker and you want your voice heard, and I'm a pretty big believer in trying to get writers' voices heard, you've got to speak up for it and meet people and get your ideas across and get on the front foot, because Americans are great at that. LA is a town full of people that are like, my idea is the best idea and this is why. As Australians, we don't really do that. And I'm grateful for it. But at the same time, I also think we suffer a little bit because of it. Our humble nature or self-deprecation or whatever can get confused over there. So I've had to learn to kind of go in, a little bit cocky and, talk yourself up a bit and name drop if you have to, because it kind of is the game, I'm afraid.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Thank you, everybody. And I'm so sorry for those 3 or 4 that didn't get a question. Forgive me, Janan, I didn't see you. You weren't on my page as I was slipping through. But I'd like to conclude with one last thing to ask you. As this child that you were, who was obsessed with films, you used to create little parodies of those films afterwards, apparently. Which were some of the favorites, 1 or 2 of the favorites of your films as a young boy?
This one I can do because I did it for Filming magazine a few years ago. They were like, they had a reoccurring thing every issue, which was 5 films that changed your life. And I remember the editor of the magazine asked me that question. I was like, oh shit, how do I do that? And then I thought to myself, what 5 film posters do I have framed in my home as I was being asked the question? And not surprisingly, I think they're all kind of ones you see as a child, because I think, that's when influence really comes into your life, like you make that decision. So they were in no particular order. Jaws just made me fall in love with cinema. Back to the Future, I watched more than any other film growing up. Those 2. Die Hard was an action film that I just adored and still think is the greatest action film ever made. What are the other 2? This is a good one. Okay, there was the first film. So I'd watched the Die Hards, the Back to the Futures, the whatnot, and there was, when I was like probably too young, like 12 or something, I watched a film that told me film could be more than just entertainment. And that was a film called Taxi Driver, which I think if Nitram could be inspired by anything, it was probably that film. Having watched it, you can probably see the similarities in some regard. But Taxi Driver I had framed on my wall as a teenage boy. And then my 5th answer was to the film that changed my life, which is not necessarily your question, but was Snowtown, because it was the one film that literally changed my life. The rest kind of just influenced me in a way. So, and I have that poster framed in my office as well. So yeah, they're 5 that come to mind.
Thank you so much, Shaun. We wish you the very, very best.
Thanks, Kim. Cheers, everyone.
And thanks for taking the time. And thank you to all of you for joining us over this series. We've just loved sharing time with you. Wish you the best. May you travel well as you come out of lockdown, and all the best to you all. And love to Annabelle, Shaun.
Yeah, I will do. I'll pass that on and enjoy going back to class.
Will do. Thank you, Shaun. Thanks, everybody.